and going into a marriage to blend the family, you have to be in a secure place with that. If you're still struggling with the guilt from the divorce or the rejection or whatever it is, there is no emotional room to have that and be able to blend the family and raise these kids. You have to be as on point as possible and as strong as possible, and you can't be dealing with those issues.
Welcome to the Four Peaks Parents Podcast with Thomas Miller. Are you tired of your tweens, teens, and young adults' negative behaviors and poor choices holding you emotionally hostage, controlling your family, and ruling your life? If you answered yes, then you are in the right place. This podcast is a community for courageous parents just like you who come here to gain effective tools, skills, and take action so they can change their tween, teen, or young adult's life and improve their family's future. Welcome, everyone, to the Four Peaks Parents Podcast with your host, Thomas Miller. This is part 2 with Joy McAdams as we dive into the unwritten rules of families becoming blended. Thank you so much, Joy, for sticking around and for obviously all of the amazing golden nuggets that you share with us in the first episode, and so glad that you're still able to hang with us again. And I want to give everyone a little bit of info if you missed the first one of who the heck Joy is. Joy is a rock star. That's all I should say, just period. Joy is a rock star, period. So Joy is a TEDx speaker. She recently launched a business providing health training camps that help professionals reach their highest level of their performance through physical challenges. She also helps healthcare providers thrive, not just survive. She helps practices put together specialized marketing and business strategies that bring them back to life and produce growth. In essence, and Joy can certainly correct me if I'm wrong, she helps docs regain control of their practices, not just be working kind of as a hamster on a wheel all day long and becoming more and more and more detached from their patients' outcomes and or experience. Through helping them step fully into a concierge medicine approach or model, they're able to regain control of their practice and get back to doing what they love, and also obviously enhance their clients' outcomes in doing so. Did I miss anything?
No, that was good.
That was good. That was good.
Uh-huh.
Awesome. So as we think about, this second part, I wanted us to be a little bit more technical or tactical as you kind of really, now that you've put on that wider lens, and I so appreciate, again, all your ability to be introspective and the way you shared in the first episode about so many amazing triumphs that you've had, as well as, of course, a bunch of mistakes and things that you didn't realize then, but realize now. What are some other things that you really think are so important for any parent that may be going through this process? If you were to send the elevator back down, what are some things that you really would hope a parent begins to start thinking about as they prepare so they can be in the best position to hit the ground running as they're going through this blending family process?
Oh yeah, there's a lot to unpack. And you have to start with the root, which we also talked about right before you hit record, is when you're considering, remarriage after a divorce, or even still considering divorce, you have to realize there is no greener grass on the other side. It's always just going to be a trade-off. There may be amazing things about this next person in this next marriage, but there's also going to be things just like in your last marriage, which aren't so amazing. And, when you're looking at maybe the current marriage you're still in, at least you know what you're dealing with, right? So never think that there's some magical, it's going to take work wherever you move to. But, and going into a marriage to blend a family too, you have to be in a secure place with that too. If you're still struggling with the guilt from the divorce or the rejection or whatever it is, you really need to make sure that first you're working on that with a professional counselor like yourself, because there is no emotional room to have that and be able to blend the family and raise these kids. You have to be as on point as possible and as strong as possible. And you can't be dealing with those, you need help to deal with those issues, because all of that will just be projected onto this process of being able to blend a family. And one of the biggest things you need to consider, usually when you are blending a family, is there's going to be exes on both sides, right? And you have to remember that the reason you divorced your spouse was because you didn't see things at some point the same way, right? So just because you're divorced, it means there's still going to be a lot of things that you don't see the same way. And you have to be able to accept that. You also have to be able to accept that now moving forward into a blended family with exes on both sides, it's always going to be broken. And you have to learn to live with broken, because if you're chasing trying to put it all back together again, one example is holidays are always going to be challenging. Okay. There's never going to be this little holiday where you wake up and, for the most part, it's a normal holiday, right? There's going to be the shuffling of everybody back and forth and trying to figure out the times. And you just have to accept that that's what it's like, right? And not get frustrated in the fact that trying to make it this magical, perfect holiday. It's not structured that way anymore. But when it comes to the exes too, you got to realize they're going to have different approaches to parenting. They're going to have different processes on both sides. And you have to be respectful of that. You can't expect them to go to the other house and everything be run exactly the way you think it should be run. One funny example that we were saying was when I got married for the second time, my youngest was a 3-year-old little girl. My husband wasn't going to know what outfits to put on her, how to put the bows in her hair, how to do everything perfectly. And for me to pick her up from school and her be walking towards the car and even the expression on my face, like, what is she wearing? Or why does she look like that? Or I could do that, or I could focus on, oh my goodness, he got her to school fed. He got her to school safely. She has clothes on. She seems happy. So, I choose to focus on that, right? Not, give the phone call of what the heck is this? That's just it seems like a little example, but it's something that could be a big source of, conflict there. And then also as the kids start to get older, they're going to try to play you guys. They will. They'll try to play to get the most advantage out of both. And, there was times where they may come and they may give a sad sob story and they may complain about how something was done. And I could have jumped on the bandwagon and, bought into it. Or I could say, you know what? When you're at dad's house, that's how he chooses to do things. And when you're at my house, this is how we do things. And just if you don't like the way things are done there, just be glad that you do have days of the week where it's not done like that. So you can focus on the fact that you get relief from that, and really just always painting a positive. Even if there's remarriages and stuff on both sides, if there's feedback from how they were maybe talking negative about you, not letting that get to you. Because number one, you don't know if that's truly what was said. You don't know if the kids misinterpreted it. But even if it was evil, even if it was with a malicious intent, not letting the kids pick up on that at all. I would always, if anything was said negative, or negative feedback, I was always like, well, I'm sorry they feel that way, but that doesn't bother me. It's fine. They have a right to their opinions. And, if it bothers you, maybe say something in the moment, but just always letting the kids see it bounce off, right? Because what is that teaching them? It's also teaching them that in life, when people say bad things about them or do things, that we get the choice to choose how we let it affect us, right? And if we choose to let negative things bounce off and we demonstrate that, then they're going to re-implement that in their lives. And it also kind of limits that conflict, because even though the kids may be wanting to play you, at the end of the day, the last place you want to put your kids in is in the middle of a war over finances. I mean, sometimes, I've seen, not in our case, thank goodness, but I've seen times where maybe there's a field trip and the kid comes home with the form and the mom's calling the dad, hey, it's your turn to pay. And the dad doesn't want to pay. And then now the kid's put in the middle, wondering if they're even going to be able to go on this field trip, because the mom is trying to prove the point that it's the dad's time to pay this. And you can, or dental bills, medical bills. I mean, there's always expenses, and that can turn into this war where the kid is stuck in the middle. And that's so unfair to them. They don't need to be there. That needs to be a private conversation that the kid knows nothing about. And at the end of the day, if the dad or whoever choose not to pay it, just step up and pay it. It's for your kid, right? It's not to prove a point to get back at somebody. And I think this is probably harder to deal with maybe in a divorce where, the person may have felt rejected or didn't want the divorce and they're just trying everything to get back at that person that left them or whatever. I mean, I could see how those emotions could come up. But at the end of the day, never put your kids in the middle. Never talk bad about the other parent, ever. Even if it's valid, even if it's right. I mean, as long as it's not a point to where the kid's in danger in any way or anything like that. At the end of the day, that's still their parent and they still want to love them and they still want to respect them. I don't care how sorry they are. And I'm not referencing that in my case, but I don't care how sorry that other parent is. Never say anything negative about that kid's parent, because at the end of the day, it's going to hurt your child. It's not hurting them, it's hurting the child. And every child wants to look up and respect their spouse. And I think in our cases, and I'll just be transparent, I messed up in this way with an ex on the other side,
Mm-hmm.
trying to make them be the parent that I thought they needed to be, trying to being resentful if I felt like I was overcompensating, trying to make up for it, trying to point out and force somebody to be some way. It's not going to go well. And unfortunately, what's going to happen is those kids are always going to be loyal to that real parent. And even if you're completely in the right, they're going to look at you with question. They're going to start to resent you, and you will never win over that biological parent ever. So don't even try to go there. It's only going to cause mass chaos, mass confusion, and a lot of hurt. And, the underlying point here is keep the kids out of it. If you love them, take it all. Like, you take it on you, you eat it, as long as you keep them safe and emotionally out of the whole situation. And I think that was huge too in helping the kids grow up healthy emotionally.
Well, I'm going to give you an honorary clinical degree. You're definitely, if you were doing the speech at like a college right now, you know how it's like they get the honorary doctorate or the honorary master's. You get an honorary master's in psychology for sure, based on that segment you just spoke about. Holy crap! So the stuff I hear in there, which I absolutely love, is number one, be a leader. And as much as you might be carrying old hurts and old wounds, because particularly if you were the one that, as you said, was maybe less apt for the divorce, especially if there's acrimony there, if there's affairs there, push your feelings aside, which is very hard to do. Really put some insulation between your hurt and then the parenting choices you're making, because at the end of the day, I 100% concur that your children are the North Star and they must be the North Star, and you must meet at the child's needs. That has to be the thing that both parents, irrespective of whatever garbage they have going on, and again, injuries and wounds, they can't put the finger in the wound and then be unconsciously or consciously acting out towards the child. I unfortunately have thousands, unfortunately, of stories like the ones you referenced, but way worse, where I have unfortunately worked with families that have had to do the drop off at police stations because they were so nasty toward each other, and it had to be done in a public place. And what does that model for that child, right? As you spoke about, every child wants to look up and see or think of their parent as Superwoman or Superman, even if their parent is drinking too much or drugging or struggling with bipolarity or mental health or depression or whatever. It is never helpful if another parent is tearing that parent down, because that is so part and parcel to who that child is. And the parent's wellness, even if it is not great, we could still be factual, and we could say things, to a child that's like, yeah, we do have different expectations here. Yeah, you're right. That must be hard for you that you're allowed to stay up to whatever hours, or you can drink Red Bull and play Fortnite to 4 a.m. There's nothing wrong with saying, I can appreciate that must be difficult, coming to our house. And now we're asking you to, not swear or use different language or actually take out the trash, whatever that is. There's a way to validate and honor that child's journey and make it actually relational to you versus tearing down or attacking that other parent. Or, as you said, leaving your circle of control and trying to go and tinker in their circle, which is actually the first exercise I do in the Four Peaks Parents program, is help parents immediately identify what can we control, what can't we control. And so many parents, I've done this as well, I'm guilty of this too, we spin our wheels when we're outside our circle and we're trying to basically contrive outcomes through other people or other things that we have no right, and we've left our lane, so to speak. So the ability for you to like get to that higher level, what a journey. I mean, talk about maturity, talk about becoming seasoned and having clarity. And I just love the fact that in there, what I heard, the biggest theme was you are not reacting, right? You are not reacting from your amygdala firing and going through the fight or flight and allowing all these emotionality or just traumas to kind of run roughshod over your parenting. You were able to take that collective breath, sit back, take your internal temperature, and then decide, right? Choose the choice as opposed to letting it choose you. I'm sure you failed at times too, but that's the overarching theme I got. And that's everything. I mean, that's everything. And at the end of the day, the child will be fine. The child will be fine because children need to feel safe, and we need to couch our children's worlds appropriately based on what they can and cannot handle. And as you talked about in the first episode, having a blended family with kids at different age points, developmental points, different cognitive abilities, intellectual abilities, learning differences, mental health, non-mental health, whatever. That's so hard for families to have that situational awareness. But at the end of the day, I think we all make things a little bit more complicated than they are, because if we're providing our kids with structure and safety and showing up to the best we can, and we are mitigating or managing some of that, as you said, kind of like drama that could be going on, and you kept that offline, and that was one less stupid thing that your kids had to deal with that was not placed in their lap, that's huge. That's huge. The ability to kind of keep that stuff, on the side and the peripheral for them is amazing, because already it's a huge transition, and it sounds like you really did a nice job streamlining their experience.
Yeah. And one last thing I'll add, and this is something that is another unwritten rule, is when you, like, for instance, my husband had a spouse on the other side, you have to be very gracious in the fact that sometimes you may feel like they're jumping through hoops for that other spouse. There might even be jealousy there or insecurity, and you may be taking the wrong way, like, why do they jump through the hoops? You have to remember that is still the parent to his kids, right? And so even though he may be doing things that seem, like unfair, like I said, jumping through hoops, at the end of the day, he's just trying to do what we just talked about, is do what's best for the kids. And a lot of times I see the other spouse can really put that person in the middle and make them feel guilty because they're maybe paying more, like we said, or, pulling more of the weight and all of that. And we can feel like it's taking away from us, or that they're putting them as I can't say the word, preferential treatment. But at the end of the day, we got to go back to what we just talked about, is the only reason he's doing that is for the kids, and let them do that. Don't put them in the middle where they're feeling guilty about maybe overcompensating and doing more than they're required, because it's for the kids.
So much emotional maturity there. I mean, that's my whole thing. I say all the time when I'm moving families through the second peak, we must be unflappable amidst our kids' storm. It's not just our kids' storm. We have to be unflappable amidst the macro storm, right? 9/11 was my first day of grad school at NYU. So that was a really welcome to social work kind of moment. And, and then there's a COVID, and then there's this. There's always going to be things, and we are humans. And as Joy was tearing up a little bit in the first part of this interview, which I loved, that's healthy. And the previous podcast was just me talking about how to help usher your kids through grief. And I share how it's totally appropriate to cry. And I use the example of the tear soup. Someone's making soup and they're crying into the soup, and that actually makes the soup better. And that's different than me being drunk and passed out on the kitchen floor and then doing what's called parentification to my child, which is asking my child to become a mini parent, which many successful people I've worked with along the way are children of alcoholics, and they did become a surrogate parent, and they did become the quote unquote caretaker. And there's mostly disadvantages in that, but there's a lot of resiliency in that because they learned how to become incredibly individuated and self-sufficient. And I think of myself in that way too. And some of my struggles are now asking for help at times. I love that you're again getting this place of maturity, putting on that wider lens, thinking about what's in the best interest of your kids, as much as the preferential treatment thing
Yeah.
could feel like, what WTF, buddy, right? This is supposed to be about us. There's so much to, like deep, deep parenting there around really gargling each child's kind of like worldview or wellness and being like, okay, yeah, I have to audit each kid and I have to audit our family. And there's so much toggling and juggling. It takes a lot of adaptability. I get why you were so passionate about sharing, because again, it's one of these things I think assumptively we assume is like no big deal. And it's very complicated. And there's a lot of nuance. And you've done a lot of work, to get where you are here, a lot of work. Were you doing Ironmans during all of this?
It was towards the end, not when the kids were little, but when I started into endurance sports, we still had 4 kids at home. But there's something magical about once you have at least one driving, it starts to help, right? Once one gets to the age, they can pick up, they can do the school pickup, and then you have 2 driving. And honestly, it came at a good time because there was other struggles coming into our life. And I really found, so I'm speaking this weekend on that part of the brain. It's the anterior, I have to write it down, the anterior cingulate, I forget, that's the AMCC, the anterior mid cingulate cortex. It's the part of your brain that regulates, it really gives you the discipline, willpower, tenacity, emotional regulation, and pain regulation. And science shows that every time you do hard things, this part of your brain grows. And so without knowing it, stepping into endurance sports was at the perfect time because I started to grow and develop this part of my brain, which is what I needed to be able to come back and translate every area of life. And it's the reason why pro triathletes actually peak when they're closer to their 40s as opposed to in their 20s. It's because that brain is now bigger. You look at David Goggins, the size of that in his brain is probably huge. It's not because he was blessed with
Sure.
resilience. No,
Sure.
he developed it. And so as we develop that more and more, endurance sports really helped me come back, to be able to handle, because this is a lot, it's a lot of life going on, not to mention, everything else we juggle.
First off, I love the neuroscience lesson. And you said this is a talk coming up. And Joy is if you're not already following her on LinkedIn, please check her out, because the thing that I love about people like Joy and David Goggins, and putting you in the same breath, is that they are showing us what is possible. And one of the things that I talk about in the final peak of the Four Peaks parent podcast, and there's a whole video series that folks they get me as well every week as a Sherpa and a guide to help them immediately send any kind of symptomatology or just negative behaviors or just anything that is ostensibly unhealthy in the system that your children either are demonstrating or we as parents are demonstrating to the background. That idea of, as you said, stretching, leadership, I always say, is it's not innate. I mean, some people might have more maybe leadership abilities or have more maybe emotional intelligence.
Oh, yeah.
But we can learn these things. We can grow, we can stretch. I finished a book, actually, interestingly, about dementia, and this idea that we just have fixed memory and it's just wanes and then we get dementia is not true. We can add back wax. Yes, there are things over time. We do lose our hearing. Particularly, I went to a lot of punk shows and kind of metal shows as a high school kid. So I'm sure that will show up later on in life. But the point is that I'm a huge fan, and we all know that. I mean, that we can add to our toolkit. We can rewrite our story. Even if there's been trauma, I say this all the time for families, we can still create corrective emotional experiences. We can still have, even if there's a negative exposure for our children in some way about something, whether it's this divorce, blended family issue, it's still an opportunity to help our kids expand and grow and stretch and have more emotional mastery, have more cognitive flexibility, have greater perspective, deepen their empathy, deepen their ability to have more what I call insularity, which is insulation between their button board and whatever that trigger is. So I agree with all of that. So that's a great talk, by the way.
I'm going to jump in here real quick. Sorry to interrupt you, but I want to say in relation to the healthcare, one of the biggest conversations we have with the primary care right now is the epidemic of obesity and the frustration that the primary care have with, because they're dealing with fatty liver. The fatty liver leads to cirrhosis. Cirrhosis means you're going to need a liver transplant, and they can put all that before the patient. But all they need to do is the discipline of exercise and a healthy diet, and they can't do it. And this is a lot to do with that part of the brain that I just mentioned. It's because it's not developed because we live in such an easy society today. So literally, they don't have that ability to have that discipline to make those choices because that part of the brain is so small. And so that's another reason why it's so important, aggressive patients, to be doing hard things every day, just to do hard things. That's what makes a high performer. That's what grows that part of your brain. And that's what's going to translate to every area of life. And that's why it's so important. And that's, kind of what I'm speaking to. But the same thing when it comes to parenting, the discipline to not be selfish, to put the kid first, to eat it when the ex should be doing something and they shouldn't. But all of that is that regulation that we need. And it's all developed through doing hard things. And it doesn't have to be just physical things. It could be hard things like forgiveness, ice baths, all these hard things that, eating healthy, making the right choices, like hard things grow you. And ultimately, when they do scans of brains of people who have lived into their 90s into 100s, guess what? The size of that brain is big. So ultimately, it leads to the willpower to live. And it's so important.
I concur with everything you're saying. And, we met on LinkedIn, I think in 2016, and all my videos, because I was living in the Berkshires, were basically like me hiking with the boys. And I have two boys, and, being in the Berkshires, everyone hikes, everyone is, in the woods. And there's a great book called Last Child Left in the Woods. And it's all about free play. It's all about, again, stretching. And there's so much, we'd be here all day from an OT perspective. I mean, there's never been a greater need for OT now, which is scary. And we know even with COVID, that even sent some of the physicality or lack thereof, or wellness, or the degree to which wellness was a part of people's lifestyle, even further backwards. And then obviously, don't even get me started on screens. And again, how lazy we as parents are becoming. And I'm guilty of this as well, in exporting parenting. And so the more we can ask our kids and model for our kids, there's a beautiful parallel process in that. My kids are playing at a very high level at soccer, and the lessons there are huge, from delaying gratification, frustration tolerance, grit, resiliency, being a part of a team. It doesn't even have to be anything to do with sports. If you have a kid that, again, not to say an ASD kid cannot be on a sports team, they certainly can, but something as simple as doing hard for an ASD kid, might be being a part of a group activity. It might be asking someone out. That is a Mount Everest activity, is asking someone out, or potentially initiating a social hangout, or going and sitting at a new cafeteria table. So the more that we stretch and we model that stretch, and the more that we, again, are doing that from a place of regulation, the more likely we are to create co-regulation. And and I'm sure you lost your shit at some points too, as I have as a dad. But the thing I hear throughout the whole thread, through both of these interviews, was this idea, again, of stepping back, seeing what is the greatest good here. And I know your faith is a huge thing for you too. And the greatest good for you was always like, how do what I heard is the theme, not bubble wrap my kids at all, not try to shield them from the world, not try to, take care of every issue in snowplow or helicopter, but how can I just create the best process for them? How can I be so attenuated to their needs? How can I accompany them and do it, with the head on a swivel, and zoom in for this kid, zoom out for this one, zoom in on this one, and just do the best I could. And really, again, never, ever, ever ask them to do something additional beyond what is already the current challenge of this transition, and do the best you could to buffer and keep your own, stuff on the side. And I love the piece. Just want to say one last thing that you said a couple of minutes ago, or a couple of questions ago. about how kids will find the path of least resistance and try to split and try to manipulate. And so the thing that I just would add for blended families or any parents, and one of the podcast episodes early on in the show is called how to avoid getting split by your kids, is STFD, slow the fudge down. I must tell parents this every single day, is when your kid texts you, snaps you, whatever, calls you, is in your face, and it's crisis mode and they need an answer about whatever the hell it is. Well, on some level, it feels that way to them because everything is in the here and now. And yes, oh my God, Jen is having a sleepover and I need to know. And everyone's going and everyone's doing it. And if we don't go, I'm dead. I'm this socially dead for the rest. You still can say, look, I know this is so important to you. Validate. Because it's so important to you, I'm not in the best headspace. Let me go and get with dad or mom or whoever. And the more that you can actually flow, I know that there are differences, as you said, in parenting styles across the four of you, but the more that you can present to the degree you can a united front, that really shuts down that ability that child can get you at your weakest and split the two or the four or the three of you. So
Yeah, no, absolutely. So much good stuff here.
Oh my
So
God.
much good stuff. And my heart goes out because it really is a world of unwritten rules. But I think the more you, like we mentioned, that you can keep the overall wellness of the children in mind, that's going to help be your North Star, like you said, to direct you as to how to react in each situation.
Well, I cannot thank you enough, Joy. I mean, again, you got an honorary master's degree from being here. I think all of us have learned a lot more about, of course, how to navigate, and the piece I love the that you dorked out on the neuroscience, and we need to hear more. And so, again, if folks are not already following you, please go check out Joy's McAdams, McAdams, her LinkedIn profile. And then you can also definitely check out her TED Talk right on YouTube as well, which is so great. And she is always inspiring me. I did work out very late last night, very hardcore workout. So she's always inspiring me to do hard things and to go that much further and to stretch myself. And I can't thank you enough. So thank you so much. It's just been a pleasure.
Thank you. Do the hard things. And last caveat, when the hard things get comfortable, like if you love running, a hard run doesn't count anymore because it's still within the heart of comfort. So you have to jump out and do new hard things to continue to grow that part of your brain. So you never get away from it. Do the hard.
I love that. Awesome. Thank you so much, Joy. And thank you to everyone. I can't wait to see y'all in the next episode. And please, if you haven't already joined the newsletter, there's ways to know how you can connect with me as well in the show notes. And of course, head over to fourpeaksparents.com to be a part of this community and learn more. Thanks so much. Be well. Bye. Hey everyone, Thomas here. First off, it means the world to me that you took the time to listen to my podcast. Thank you from the bottom of my heart. Also, if you want to receive the latest podcast updates, as well as expert parenting tips and practical strategies for navigating your tween, teen, or young adults challenges directly to your inbox, then sign up for my newsletter. The link is in the description. And most importantly, if you're tired of feeling overwhelmed, stuck, stressed, and are losing sleep because you're constantly worried about your tween, teen, or young adult, your first step is to realize that you still have a choice and can do something about it. I'm ready to help you take action and create the results you desire today. Just go to fourpeaksparents.com and book a free strategy call. Let's do this. Last thing, while you were listening to this show, who was the one person that you thought could really benefit from hearing it? Please share it with them.